I think Pinochle is an underrated game. What is Pinochle, you might ask? Oh, right. Pinochle is a trick-taking betting card game with teams and variants for 2 to 6 or even 8 players. It's like if the best parts of poker and hearts had a baby. But first, a short history. Pinochle is derived from two games, Bezique and Binocle. Both games originated in Switzerland in the 1600s and later spread to southern Germany. When the game moved to the US via German immigrants in the late 1800s, mispronunciations of the name Binocle turned it into Pinochle. From there, it spread through communities and was passed down through generations until it reached me. Please note, there are a lot of Pinochle variations. While most are very similar, I will not be explaining the version outlined on Wikipedia. I think this version is too gambly for my liking. The version I will be covering, my family's version, is a lot more skill-based, and no team is going to jump ahead by hundreds of points just because they have a lot of queens or something. Alright, enough preface. Time to actually explain the game. First, to play you will need 2 Pinochle decks and 5 friends. The first one is easy enough to find at Walmart or Amazon. The second one, though, it might be a challenge for you. If it is actually a challenge for you, you can play with 4 people using a single deck. The only difference is you have one teammate, you pass 4 cards, and bidding is much lower and goes by tens. In 6-handed Pinochle, there are 2 teams consisting of 3 people. But how do you decide who's on what team, and who's the first dealer for that matter? Well, you throw for aces. Deal cards face up to each player. The first player to get an ace is the first dealer. But don't stop yet. Continue dealing cards until 2 more people are thrown an ace. Skip any player who has already been thrown an ace on successive throws. These players make up one team, the remaining players make the other team. If needed, players switch seats so team members are not beside each other. We have now found our first dealer and we're ready to deal out the cards. The dealer shuffles the deck and deals out all the cards to the players face down clockwise. Because the deck is 96 cards, you can speed this up by dealing 4 cards at a time, or 3 with a lucky card dealt to each player at the end. Each person should have 16 cards in their hand. While you technically can order your hand however you want, you should order them by suit first, alternating colors, then rank. Ascending or descending order is a personal preference, but if you're one of my siblings watching this, aces go on the right and you're the weird one for having them on the left. If you were paying attention to the previous slide, you may have noticed that the cards were not in the order you were expecting. And for that matter, there's less cards and ranks than you're used to. What's up with that? To answer your first question, yes, the 10 is the second highest rank in the game. Unlike poker, it beats jacks, queens, and kings. And honestly, I don't have a good answer for why. With the second one, I do have a theory. There are no 2s through 8s, and there are 2 copies of each card. That means it's more likely you get some kind of match in only 6 ranks where you get 16 cards than in games like poker where you have 13 ranks and only get 5 cards. Like, have you seen the charts for Texas Hold'em poker? They tell you that 50% of hands are straight up not worth playing, ever. Sure, you can get screwed in Pinochle, but nowhere near that rate. And even if you do, you don't just sit around. You're still playing, just not in control. Where were we again? Oh right. You are now ready to look at your hand. If you see lots of aces, or mostly one suit, that's good. If it's mostly 9s and jacks, you can start crying. There are 8 normal combinations of cards that score, and one bonus way that presumably one of my ancestors made up at some point, because I cannot find any documentation of it anywhere online. The lowest scoring card is the 9 of trump. Sometimes called a dix, like the French word for 10, it scores 10 points. What is trump, you ask? It's the suit that the highest bidder selects, but we'll get back to that later. Just know that trump changes from hand to hand, and it's special. A king and queen of the same suit is called a marriage and scores 20 points. Unless it's the trump suit, then it's called a royal marriage and scores 40 points instead. Pinochle is specifically the jack of diamonds and queen of spades. It scores 40 points, and is also the namesake of the game, despite it not being very good. A jack in every suit, called 40 jacks, or jacks around, is worth 40 points, as the name suggests. And actually, the same idea exists for queens, kings, and aces, scoring 60, 80, and 100 points respectively. Sorry, 10 and 9, letters only. No 99s or 10-10s. In other games like poker, it's very rare to see someone get 4 of a kind. But in Pinochle, it's totally believable that someone could get 4 of a kind of something every single hand in the game. The final and most valuable combination is a run. You need the Jack, Queen, King, 10, and Ace, all of the trump suit, and it scores 150 points. Reminiscent of a straight flush, no 9 is necessary. Except I lied just now. Do you remember that extra way of scoring that I talked about earlier? Yeah, it's actually worth more. If you have all 4 aces of trump, you score 200 points. We just call it 200 aces. You can reuse cards to score multiple different things, but not the same thing twice, like cribbage scoring but nerfed. For example, if you have a marriage in spades, you can reuse the queen for Pinochle, but you can't reuse the queen for a second marriage if you had a second king. She's loyal to her man. You would need an additional queen to score another marriage. Successive copies score the same amount of points as the first. The only exception to reusing cards is runs and royal marriages. If you score a run, you cannot score the royal marriage inside of it as extra points. The most extreme example of reusing cards is something called roundhouse. That is a king and queen in every suit. It scores 3 regular marriages, 1 royal marriage, 80 kings, and 60 queens for a total of 240 points. There are 3 phases to Pinochle: bidding, melding, which we just talked about, and playing tricks. Bidding begins with the person to the left of the dealer, and action moves clockwise. You are bidding on the meld in your hand, what you think you will get from your partners, and the amount of points you think you will get from tricks. The minimum bid is 100, the minimum raise is 50, and the increment is 10. If you don't want to bid, you can pass. As long as nobody passes, each person will have 2 chances to bid. I don't know what happens if everyone passes, because 100 points is an extremely cheap bid. Most of the time, the bid will end up between 500 and 700, although I've seen bids go for as cheap as 250 and as high as 980. The partners of the person who took the bid choose 3 cards to pass. Almost always you want to pass trump, not the 9, and if you run out of trump, then aces. Basically, the only exceptions would be if you're breaking up your own run or 100 aces. Melding is when you reveal the scoring combinations of cards to all players and actually score them. The player who took the bid melds first. They must save 6 cards to pass back to their partners. If you can help it, you should pass back kings and queens in hopes that your partners can match them and score extra points. After they have passed back, everyone else can meld. After all players' meld has been counted, they pick up their cards and move on to the trick-taking phase. This phase of the game is probably the most complicated and strategic. The player who took the bid leads. All players must follow the lead suit if they can. If not, then they must play the trump suit if they can. If they have neither the trump suit nor what was led, they can play any suit. If the trump suit was led, you must beat the rank led if you can. For example, fishing is a common tactic where you intentionally play a low trump card like a queen to try and force out a higher trump card like a 10 or an ace from the opposing team. All trump cards beat all ranks from other suits. Even the 9 of trump will beat the ace of another suit. The player with the highest card on the trick takes it for their team and puts it into a shared pile by the team. That player leads the next trick. Once every trick has been played, you can count up your team's counters that you took. A king and up are worth 10 points, a queen and below are worth nothing. Also, you get 20 points just for taking the last trick. So the maximum amount of points you could get if you took every counter and the last trick is 500 points. If your team also takes every trick, the opposing team scores nothing for the entire hand, called losing your meld. Unless you have an exceptionally strong or weak hand, you can expect to get about 300 points through tricks. You add the tricks to the scores you have for melding. If the total for this round is greater than your bid, then hunky-dory. But if the team that took the bid did not reach their bid, they score 0 points and subtract the amount they bid from their total. This game isn't all or nothing, it's all or negative. The new dealer is the person on the left of the current dealer. You play 6 rounds, so each person will be the dealer once. The team with the highest score at the end of the 6 rounds is the winner. In some games, the winning team is fairly obvious 3 or 4 rounds in. With these rules, you basically never see a team make more than 1,100 in one round. You have now reached the end of this video. I would like to thank my parents for teaching me this game, and Google for having free-to-use sets of playing card images. I would probably have never made this video if such a resource didn't exist.